On a sunny morning in 1991, Daegu, South Korea, 5 little boys decided to explore Mount Warryong for salamander eggs. It was just an ordinary day until they never came back home. Welcome to the Croaked Case podcast, where we delve into the infamous South Korean case known as the Frog Boys. My name is Ashlyn Ship, and I'll be your host for your listen.
Yo, I'm Jared, co-host of this segment, and I think there's more to this case than what's on the surface.
And I'm Jimmy, also a co-host of this segment. And in all honesty, I think this is just another missing case.
It was 4 hours later when one of the kids, Chio-won, the oldest one, didn't show up to his taekwondo class. This made one of the parents realize that something was off. After realizing that it wasn't just his son that was missing, but the other 4 he went out with, he formed his own search and rescue party with the parents. After searching for a while, the parents found out that Mount Warryong, and most likely where the kids explored, was next to a military base.
Hold up. Where are the police? Why are the parents doing the searching?
Remember, there was a nationwide election throughout the week? And in South Korea, elections are seen as priorities, so much so that it's considered a holiday. So, essentially, everyone was too busy watching the election on their TVs or at the election rallies that they wouldn't notice a few kids go missing.
Even with that, the police should do their job.
From my understanding, back then, the police didn't have any solid leads on what happened to them. Even today, there's still little to no evidence on what led to their deaths, and their whereabouts were never properly addressed for over a decade.
That part kinda angers me a bit. The police weren't really careful when it came to piecing their identities to what was left of their bodies. Instead, they wanted to make sure that they could gather the remains in one place. And I understand their priorities as investigators, but the parents never had a proper way of mourning them.
Yeah, honestly, that was my initial reaction learning about that part too. The whole case, in fact, had a lot of incompetent police present. The fact that their bodies were found nearly a decade after their disappearance with 300,000 members of the police force searching for them just blows my mind.
And not even that too, but their bodies were found 2 miles away from their houses, and the mountain was searched over 500 times in a single year. Because of this, a lot of true crime enthusiasts, myself included, are speculating that there's a lot more here than what's present. I've seen a few K-dramas in my days, and I can say for certain that corrupt police are a reoccurring theme.
So, how exactly were their bodies found?
Their bodies were discovered in September 2002 when 2 men went searching for acorns on the same mountain and even in the same area that had already been searched. One of the boys had 2 bullet wounds in his head and 3 others had blunt force trauma also to the head, as well as additional fractures. What's even more suspicious about that is that the men reported the bodies through an anonymous voice call.
Sus.
Actually, I think it makes sense. If I found the bodies, I would have called anonymously too. I wouldn't want to be investigated and seen as a suspect. And, like you said, police can be incompetent and make mistakes. I honestly just see this as a simple case of missing kids and dumb polices.
Are you serious? The suspicious appearance of the bodies, the tied up clothes, the bullet holes, that doesn't raise any suspicions to you?
Well, let's not jump to conclusions yet. You could say that about a lot of the details surrounding the case, like the fact that their ages were all ascending in order, where it was 9, 10, 11, 12, and 13.
And there was a 6th kid too, right? I'm pretty sure he was 9 at the time as well, but it would be funny if the killer decided to leave him out the equation because he broke the pattern.
Actually, the 6th kid was left out of the scenario even before the kids decided to go on their venture. He was called by his mom for breakfast and didn't get a chance to go with his friends.
So, you're saying the mom may have killed them?
Ain't no way. But that would be kind of funny.
So, if they weren't killed by the mom then who did the police initially say was responsible for the murder?
Well, their first thought was actually hypothermia. It makes sense. I mean, their bodies were found on a mountain huddled together. Their parents weren't satisfied with that answer, though, and demanded a full-blown investigation so they could get closure and a proper reason for their deaths.
Well, that seems like a pretty satisfactory conclusion to me.
Well, it does sound like a good conclusion at first, until you consider that some experts outside of the case note that the altitude of the location wasn't high enough. It was virtually impossible for hypothermia to be the cause of death.
Well, if you want to go by the word of the police, then another thing you should put into consideration is that they thought at one point they were runaways. I'm not exactly sure what business elementary schoolers would have leaving their old life behind, but it's a possibility.
Also, to add on to the family's search and seizure, they also plastered posters around the town to draw attention about the case. After this, the chairman of National Organization of Finding Missing Children and Family saw the turmoil of the parents and helped the families by holding events to spread awareness.
I read an article by the organization saying that there was a particular person that would always show up to the events, but would never participate. And it turns out that he wasn't a member of the organization either. My theory is that he was involved with the disappearance and ultimately the murder of the 5 children.
One thing we should also put into consideration is that there were over 500 leads the police received, and all of them essentially amounted to nothing. There were even people on the phone saying they were holding the kids for ransom, but no one showed up at the location they claimed the kids were being held at.
Oh yeah, one of the callers even pretended to be one of the kids. Kim Jong-sik crying for his mom, which is super messed up if you ask me.
Alright. Hear me out, guys. What if the boys were actually just abducted by aliens?
You're kidding, right?
Nah, it's actually a theory. Some people actually thought that they were kidnapped and beaten to death by space aliens. Think about it. Their bodies were never found, despite hundreds of police officers, until a decade later. My theory is that they got abducted for experiments, and after a decade, got dumped back on Earth.
Moving on. You guys remember how the pond where the frog boys were found was near a shooting range? The military often used that area to practice their shooting. In fact, there were unused bullets found in the boy's shirt, the one that was tied in knots.
Are you insinuating that the military might have been involved? What could the military possibly want with a bunch of kids?
My bet is that they knew too much. One of the soldiers may have accidentally shot one of the boys. Since the other boys were witnesses, bam, they all gotta go. To cover it up, the military hit the boys, which also explains the bullets if you think about it.
That's some Stranger Things type stuff, man. But it doesn't really add up. The bullets found weren't the type used by the military. They were air rifle bullets. Hear me out. I think that the kids got caught lacking in the back rooms when they went to go search for salamander eggs. This makes sense because that's why they were gone for so long. My second theory is that when you die in the back rooms, your body goes back to our reality, and that's how their body was found.
If some of you guys don't know what the backrooms are, it's a series of levels that exist outside our own reality, which each level getting progressively harder and containing more creatures. The only way to enter the backrooms is to be no-clipped or to glitch out of reality.
There's another creepy theory that there were outcast people who lived in the woods who killed the boys for organs due to the urban legend of how kids' liver cures illnesses.
I don't know how likely that would be for cannibals or backrooms to be in the mountains. However, one thing to consider is a theory that North Korea may have had something to do with the boys' death. South Korea and North Korea have been in conflict since the 1950s due to differences in ideology and association with other countries. Since the war didn't end in a treaty or peace agreement and instead ended in an armistice, they, legally speaking, are still at odds.
That seems like a cool theory to consider too, until you realize that Mount Daegu isn't that close to the border between the two countries. It's in the southern region. It may also not be accurate to believe in all the stereotypes of North Korea.
You know, one popular, less insane theory people were speculating is that Kim Jong-sik, one of the boys' dad, ended up killing all the kids.
No way.
Yeah. Apparently, a psychologist made the bold claim that he was to blame for their disappearances. And due to the low number of criminal psychologists in the country at the time, everyone was quick to believe them.
Yeah, and something strange but supports that theory was the fact that the boys' shoes were found in his bathroom after they had all disappeared.
Also, it's worth noting that according to Psychology Today, a study supported by the National Institute of Health found that 15% of homicide arrests over a 32 period were of parents killing their children. This just shows that it's possible for the parents to perform crimes like this.
To add on, the dad was an alcoholic.
Dang, that would actually be really dark if his very own dad actually killed him and all of his friends. Maybe the shoes being at his house was just a coincidence.
It could be, but we can't dismiss any theory just yet.
I mean, it is important to note that all of the parents were so deeply devastated that their children had gone missing, that they started to drown themselves with drugs and alcohol to the point where one of the dad's faces was blue from taking too many sleeping pills. It was fortunate enough that none of the parents died due to overdose. Even so, it's hard to imagine one of the parents being cold-blooded enough to commit such a crime, especially since they're still searching for their boys till this day, 29 years later.
Yeah, I could see that being the case. It's so sad to see the loss and grief that the parents have to face. It's so scary that one of the dads mentioned that he had a reoccurring nightmare since the day his boy went missing, of his son peeking into his bedroom and never turning back even as the dad called out to him.
Turns out, some of the parents even ended up quitting their jobs and went into debt to search for the boys full time. I think this just shows the immense amount of turmoil the parents went through and how much their children meant to them. The dads even put together a designated van that had the son's missing posters on them to help find them.
Something to also take into consideration, however, was the fact that there was a suspicious gunshot followed by a scream from the mountains heard by a witness in the town the day that the boys went missing. This is strange since the shooting range was supposed to be closed off due to national holiday. Even the president was involved in ordering for the search for the boys. Yet it is odd that the police did not investigate the military, even though their media mentioned it so much.
I see.
Also, Jimmy, your theory about the boys being abducted by aliens can be dismissed, because after the body was found, an autopsy was also done, revealing that the moss was growing on their bodies. This also shows that they were not moved after their death, and the injuries like the bullet wounds and the blunt force trauma seem to be from earthly materials.
Yeah, and about that backroom theory, I don't know how relevant it is to this South Korean case. It feels like more of an internet theory. It's very interesting, though.
Dang, y'all just keep debunking my theories left and right.
It's just so hard to ignore the clear evidence that there was a brute force and bullet wounds of the skulls of the boys. Multiple bullet shells and how the clothes were purposely tied together. It's unfortunate that the police also didn't use proper forensic tools when dealing with the remains of the boys to help identify fingerprints and such. Yet another case where the police did a bad job.
At least we can pretty much agree to lean away from the theory that the boys died of hypothermia because the boys knew the mountains very well since they often went to search for frog and salamander eggs. So if they were cold, they could have just found their way back home.
So, what's the most plausible theory?
To answer this question, our producers, Kim Tu and Latuong, have decided to interview students in Centennial High School and ask what they think is the most plausible theory. Before this interview, we've informed them of the facts, evidence, and many theories that have been formed with the case.
Thank you, Ashlyn, for handing off the Croaked Case podcast to us producers. Hello, everyone. My name is Kim Tu.
And my name is Latuong. So, Brian, after hearing all the possible reasons as to how the Frog Boys may have died, what do you believe is the most plausible theory and why?
Well, after looking at all these theories, I think the most possible one is probably the military cover-up one because you had mentioned that the rounds, it was not the same rounds that the military was using, but what if somebody was using a personal weapon? They could have shot, maybe it was a stray bullet and it hit one of the kids 2 times, they shot twice. And then all the kids panicked. Maybe the soldier heard that and they panicked, went over, and out of panic, they started attacking the other kids so that it wouldn't come out, It's a cover-up.
So you think the military did it?
I think the military did it. At least one soldier, was in on it.
I see. So how about our more skeptical theories like aliens or the famous backroom theory?
You know what? Aliens, that's so possible because there's no way that aliens aren't real. There's definitely aliens out there, and I think that they're way more advanced than us. I think that they definitely do have UFOs, and it would make sense. Because with the military one, why would nobody be able to find them if it was 2 miles away from the neighborhood? right? And after 11 years. But with the aliens, they got sucked up, they got abducted, and then they got dropped back down, within the 11-year span. I think that makes a lot of sense. There's a lot of time for them to, go missing and not be found.
Also, there's evidence saying that moss grew on the body, which could reveal that the bodies were not moved at all. So, do you still believe the alien theory?
No, because, now that wouldn't make sense, because, moss, it needs time to grow. I know a lot about moss. I went to outdoor school.
Hi, Salam. So, after hearing about the Frog Boys case, what do you think is the theory to why these boys died?
I think that most plausible theory is probably the military cover-up, in my opinion, but I don't quite think that it was the military that did it. I think maybe someone wasn't supposed to be at the base, and then they ended up accidentally shooting one of the kids, right? And then the military didn't want people to think that they had any involvement, so they had the police not really do a search just in case people would think that it was them, because they wouldn't want to get blamed for it. So I think it was kind of a combination of a simple murder and military cover-up together.
Yeah, I could totally see that as well. But how do you explain what do you think could be the explanation why all their clothes were covered in, tied in knots? Possibly. What could the military be a reason for that?
So their clothes weren't on them. Mm-mm. It was taken off of them and bundled together.
And knots.
That's weird. I don't know. That maybe they thought the clothes would be an obvious marker of the body, so they decided to take them off. That could be a reason why the kids didn't have any clothes on them. That they didn't want people recognizing the clothes hidden there because maybe they were brightly colored or something. So then they just took them off and bundled them together.
Yeah, definitely. At first, I thought it was because people take off their clothes because it's if they have hypothermia, it'd be really cold. But we already know hypothermia couldn't be the solution.
So, as our last interview, this is Emmanuel. So, Emmanuel, what do you think about the Frog Boys case, and what do you think is the most plausible theory that can form from this case?
I think that the most plausible theory from the Frog Boys case is probably that it was a military cover-up. Yeah.
Oh, that's interesting because we've interviewed 2 other people and they've also said that. Why do you think that?
I think it was likely that it was a military cover-up because the police wasn't able to go in and investigate and do a full investigation. And also that since it was so close to a shooting range, the military shooting range, it was more likely that they got shot because 2 of the kids got shot. That's what I'm connecting there.
And why do you think it's not any other theories, maybe the dad?
Well, it could be the dad also since the shoe, but I think it's more leaning towards the military cover-up because it was just so close to it, and gun range, them getting in crossfire is pretty likely.
And do you have any theories of your own?
Theory of my own. I would say that maybe those boys were killed by some kind of amoeba in the water, maybe, I don't know. And there was this case in California where a family went into a river and all 4 or 5 of them and the dog got infected by an infectious deadly amoeba virus, and they were all found dead in the forest. But that doesn't explain why they were shot in the head too. So maybe they shot themselves in the head to get out of the misery, the pain.
Dang, that's dark. Okay, but so you think the military did it?
Yeah, I think the military did it since they didn't want a full investigation from the local police.
There you have it, a case about 5 adventurous boys going missing after finding salamander eggs in a city in South Korea, famously known as the Frog Boys. Information and evidence on the case is prevalent throughout the case, but answers as to who or what caused the death of the 5 boys can't be deduced. There are only theories. Thank you for listening to Croaked Case, a new true crime series about students delving into the details and theories of not-so-known cases. I'd like to thank my co-hosts Jared and Jimmy and our producers Kim Tu and Letwang. The resources that we used throughout our Croaked Case podcast are Psychology Today, Anna Solved video titled The Tragic Case of the Missing Frog Boys, and Gracie TV's YouTube video titled The Frog Boys That Never Came Back Home. Also Wikipedia, Channel News Asia, and Medium.